started. All right, so my name is Savannah Parison, and I am the lead staff advisor at CCS. We are here as staff advisors to help answer your questions about the college in general, and to help you with your degree requirements in sort of broader context, but also help connect you to resources around campus. You're muted.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan. I forgot how to use the mute button. I am the other staff advisor at CCS. I see some familiar names here, so it's great to see y'all again. And yeah, just looking forward to hearing what our current students have to say about computing.
Hi, I'm Phil Conrad. I'm a faculty member in CCS Computing and also in the Computer Science Department in the College of Engineering. If you choose to come to UCSB in the fall, and I hope you do, I'll be one of your teachers, along with Richard Wang and Murat Kara-Orman and Daniel Lokshanoff. And so happy to answer any questions about what your first year would be like as a student. And the other people that can answer that are the students, who I think will start with Akshay.
Hi, I'm Akshay. I am a fourth year CCS computing student. I'll pass it to Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin. I am also a fourth year computing student.
Okay. Hi, I'm Marian. I'm a second year computing student with an interest in computational biology research.
Thanks, everybody. So what we're going to do first is we're going to dive into our kind of main question, not main question, it's just the first of many questions about research. And, you know, part of why we're going to start there is at the College of Creative Studies, a lot of our purpose is to help students who are ready to do research, to create projects, and really have that kind of drive to create new knowledge, right? That's part of our creative studies. And so we would like to ask our current students, you know, what kind of research or creative activity are you involved in, and when did you start it in the college?
Okay, so I can start. So I'm currently I'm a research intern on campus through the through CCEP, if you've heard of it. It's the Center for Science and Engineering Partnerships, where I've been in a year-long internship. And I've been, it's basically allowed me to get involved in a lab and do work with the lab. So I'm working in the Dynamo lab, which stands for Dynamic Networks Analysis and Modeling with Professor Ambuj Singh. But my interest is in computational biology. So I've been working on biology-related projects. I am currently working on a network inference, inferring dynamic gut microbial networks in pre-diabetics over time. And what was the other part of the question? When did I start? So yeah, I started with this internship. I applied in my first year. And then I've been working in that internship since last June. And so, yeah, getting through my lower division courses in CCS has really helped me get started in research early. Just because whenever you join a lab, usually they, professors will expect that you've had some amount of coursework done. And I think CCS has really helped me accelerate getting involved in research early. So, yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to speak on that.
Yeah, I can jump in. I did research for 1 quarter in my freshman year in the Vision Research Lab with Professor Manjunath as a National Science Foundation research experience for undergrads, or an REU. And that was super cool because honestly, I was somewhat like offered the position by the professor just because I had taken enough coursework and had the experience in my freshman year to do that REU, and he just needed some people to do some work in his lab. So I think it's crazy how accessible it is here. And I think part of the reasons we just don't have that many grad students compared to other places. So like a lot of the labs here are really staffed by the undergrads, and they're doing a lot of the work that lets the grad students get to the things they need to.
Yeah, so I did research my freshman and sophomore year. So I originally started by working in a lab in the Geverts School of Education, building a VR application along with a couple other CCS students. And I personally really like building things. So the summer after my freshman year, there's a program called the Eureka Scholars, and basically they fund you to do research at a UCSB lab for summer. So I got to work in a haptics lab with an ECE professor, and basically I was working with haptic devices and building VR applications for haptics. So that was super cool. But eventually I realized that because I like building things, I wanted to go into industry. So I kind of moved towards that route. But overall, I think it's very easy to find labs. I think undergrads, especially computing and CS majors, are in high demand. Even in labs outside of CS, that's why I usually recommend to people that there's a lot of labs that need CS people, whether that be in like stats or like Marian, like bio. So I think it's really cool how a lot of professors just kind of like need you, and it's a really great way to sort of figure out how academia works and figure out your interests and whatnot.
That's such an array of experiences. So going off of that question, how did you find these opportunities, and how, well, for y'all, it sounds like it's not that difficult to get these opportunities, but how did you do it? Did you see an ad? Did you reach out blindly because you were interested in their research? Yeah.
For me, before I came to UCSB, I was a part of this internship called the SIMS internship, if you've heard of it. So I started in research right off the bat before I even came to UCSB, but I heard that they were offering another internship for first years that were finishing up their first year. And so, yeah, I found out through that other internship I was in, but I know a lot of other students in CCS usually get involved in research by just emailing the professors involved or the grad students, learning more, and then eventually going to lab meetings and getting involved in research.
I can go next. I'm not going to lie, the way I got into research was kind of a fluke. I was at an event and I was just talking to a professor and I was just telling him about my experience. He was like, "We're looking for some undergraduates for our lab. Do you want to join?" And so I just somehow lucked my way into that lab. But I think in general, like I've been in several classes where at the end of the quarter, the professor will say, "If you're interested in joining my lab, here's some information." Or a lot of professors, if you go to their office hours a couple times and are interested in their area, they'll like say, "Yeah, we have some positions in our lab open." So I think in that way, honestly, I feel like professors are looking for students more so than like you really have to go hunt it down and really fight for it.
Yeah, similar to Marian, I also did Sims, and I did Eureka, which is the follow-up program. So like literally the same thing. And it's really cool because those programs are specifically to channel people into grad school basically, or into research. But I think in terms of like finding labs, the way I found my lab was basically in most labs have like lab meetings, and they're more than happy to let you sit in on those meetings, and you can sort of hear about the research that they're working on and see if you're interested. And usually the way research works is you work under a grad student, not the professor themselves. You do work with the professor, but most of the time it's under a graduate student. So you can sort of reach out to different grad students, whether they be in your classes or if they're in the lab themselves. And that's how you can figure out specifically what they're working on. And that's how you can find projects to work on. But yeah, like the way I did it, I literally just went online and I was like, I like VR stuff, and I thought haptics was super cool because I like human computer interaction. And so I just like reached out to him, the professor, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like we're working on a project that needs programmers." So that's kind of how I found that. And it's like Akshay said, like usually they will say yes because they love free labor. So either if you get funding, you can get funding to do research or get a paid position, or you can get units for doing research. So usually that's what most students do during the school year is they get, they basically get class units for working in a lab.
I love your range of experiences, but I also love like each one of you is like, oh, my situation's really atypical. But like I can tell you from the experience of Megan and I that like your experiences are actually very normal for CCS. And some of what you're doing, right, is networking, right? You use that word and you talk about like, oh, networking, and it sounds really scary and hard, but like going into a room and just talking to people, whether that's office hours or at an event or whatever, those are all kinds of networking. And so what you guys are doing is you're as undergraduates, like building those skills of how to like establish your professional network and make connections. So it's something that happens a lot at CCS, this sort of networking that isn't as scary as what networking is often described as, but is more a labor of passion and enjoyment. So I love hearing these stories. No matter whose stories they are, I love them. So our next question is sort of a smaller focus. It's more about your CCS classes and your cohort. And so we want to ask you to speak a little bit about how large the typical CCS classes that you experience are. And are these classes and the projects that you do as part of them, are they typically more independent or are they more collaborative? And Phil, I also want to ask you to, if you want to weigh in on this a little bit here, because you're going to have sort of big picture goggles too, and can speak a little bit about that from the perspective of just the program in general.
Well, maybe I'll start by saying that one of the courses that you take as a CCS Computing first year student is the number of the course is 1L, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything to you. But it's a projects course. And the idea is that part of the essence of CCS is that across all 8 of our majors, our students create things. So our students in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, are typically creating projects. They're participating in research, creating new knowledge. Our students in the arts and humanities are creating pieces of art, works of literature, musical compositions. And 1L is the class where you really get to express that creativity. Basically, you have one assignment for the entire 10 weeks of fall quarter, and that is to work on a project. And as the instructor for that class, I help, if you don't have any idea what project you want to work on, I help you find one. But typically students come in and they've got some ideas, right? And sometimes I help them narrow it down. But those projects can be individual, or they can be in a pair, or they can be in a group. And typically every year we have a little bit of each. Some students like working by themselves, but other students really enjoy working with others. So it's really up to you whether you prefer to work alone or whether you prefer to work collaboratively. Throughout your 4 years, though, you will definitely have opportunities to work collaboratively with others. One of the courses, actually one of the ones that I teach in the upper division is I teach a couple of different courses in software engineering. And part of the requirements for incoming students will be to take either 148 or 156. And in that class, you'll definitely be working with a group of students on a project. So I think there's both things are true. There will be some times when you'll be working by yourself and sometimes when you'll definitely be collaborating with others. So I'm curious to see what the students have to say about that.
Yeah, I can start. At least in my cohort, my smallest CCS class was 6 people and my largest was 11. I worked with a partner for both quarters of my 1L, but I think equally as important was just by being in those small classes there was a sense of a cohort. So even to this day, I will take classes with the people from my CCS cohort and we will talk about those classes. And as a result, like I honestly thrive in my classes because there's always that bouncing of ideas with my peers. And there's that support network where like, if I'm stuck, I know that there's 5 other really smart guys that can help me out and get me through my classes. So I think as important is like those small classes really just build that community. And one of the first classes that I took as a CCS computing student, the 1L class, that class in a usual year, the upperclassmen will just come and sit around the outside of the class and they'll come chat and you'll get to hear about different research experiences that they're having or cool problems they're working on. And that's kind of just a way of like almost like osmosis of information where you're just like kind of absorbing all of this info around you about various topics that you'd never even heard about. And as you slowly learn it, it'll just come up randomly. You'll be like, oh, I heard about that from that upperclassman in that first year class. So I think there's a really cool sense of community because of the small classes.
And just to clarify one thing, Akshay is exactly right when he talks about the CCS classes that you take, the ones you take within the College of Creative Studies, will tend to be of the size like between like at the smallest 4 or 6 students, at the largest maybe 16 students, typically right around 8 to 12. You will also take courses in the College of Engineering, and those will be quite a bit larger. Those courses might have 80 to 100 students in them. But what Akshay said is key. You will, in your first year, be in a cohort of 8 to 10 other CCS computing freshmen, and you'll get to know those people. And those are the people that then, when you're in that class of 80 or 100 students, you will have this group of people that you know and that you can rely on for building that sense of community. And eventually you will also get to meet students in the College of Engineering that'll become your friends and colleagues as well. But it's a lot easier to build that network when you already have a kernel of that network to start with. So I'm curious to see if Marian or Aaron, if that has been your experience as well.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Akshay in that being like in those classes within your cohort really helps you make bonds. And it's funny because Akshay is like, he's technically like a third year, but he's graduating. But his cohort was like 6 people. And I think ours was like the largest. We had like 15 people in our class. So like, we didn't get as much of like, as intimate of an experience as Akshay's, but however we did, like we were able to like connect with like our own classmates. So like for me, like there's like a group of like 4 girls in our major and we like stuck together. So we would like kind of talk about projects with each other. We would talk about all of the things going on like within the class. And it's just like great knowing that like wherever you go, everyone's sort of on the same path as each other, even though people have different interests. And you can also, not people like, just within your general cohort themselves, just hearing the things they're working on and the things they're interested in really like kind of opens your mind to the types of things you can be working on. And it can also expose you to like the type of classes they're taking and the type of labs they're working in. So it kind of gives you an idea of, I know a lot of people go into the major not really knowing what to do. A lot of times they're like I know on freshman orientation day, people are like, what are you interested in? And a lot of people are like, I don't know. Being in that cohort, you can sort of see like the possible directions you can take. So I found that to be super helpful. Yeah.
I think Akshay and Aaron summed it up perfectly. Yeah, I can't really say too much other than that. Even though your cohort's really small, it's very diverse. You'll have classmates who might be double majoring or doing a bunch of different interdisciplinary interests. Like for me personally, I'm doing bio and computer science. And I haven't really I've only met a few other people who have the same interests, but at the same time, it's great because you can expose yourself to all these different areas. And yeah, that's about it.
So I want to jump in once more quickly. I know we're talking about like the cohort and that's like your year, but I think equally as important are the people above you, several years above you. So like throughout my freshman year and second year, and even now, I will reach out to CCS computing students a year or 2 years above me for advice on like, how do I land a job? How do I get a referral? All of these things, like what classes do I take? I honestly really just ask them, like I sign up for my schedule based off of what people told me were great classes. And so I think there's that level of experience that they kind of, or that advice that is passed down almost. And that's actually really powerful.
Definitely, yeah. Or sorry, I don't know if Megan, but yeah, just to go off of Akshay, like I actually got really close to she already graduated. Her name was Leah, and we got lunch a few times, and I learned a lot about grad school research, things that I didn't already know. So reaching out to other years has also been helpful for me, at least.
Well, and now you have 3 people that you can definitely reach out to because they've spoken about how valuable it is to have older students. So kind of switching gears a little bit, CCS students take advanced courses and do research or are constantly making or engaged in your area that you love. How do you manage this workload along with extracurricular activities, and what do you do outside of CCS?
I can start with this one. I really like this question because I feel like kind of like what Akshay said, all of my friends are like I love my CCS friends, like obviously like Akshay and I, you know, Akshay is one of my really good CCS friends, but outside of that, a majority of my friends are in COE. I think when I was in CCS, I did feel that like, you know, because the community was so small, you know, it's just like its own little subculture, but you know, like I think it's even better if you can sort of expand outside of that. So for me, I joined an engineering fraternity. And so all of my friends are engineers, but not necessarily CCS or CS. And I found that it was like the best of both worlds because we all sort of have the same lifestyles and the same interests. But at the same time, we all have very similar goals in, you know, and there's people who want to go to grad school, people who want to go into industry. So there's like, I think that variety, but sort of at the same time that that similar lifestyle right there, I found that was the perfect balance for me. And honestly, I feel like in terms of workload or work-life balance, see, I feel like CCS people are not the best people to ask about work-life balance because usually work and life are very like intertwined just because of how passionate people are about what they do, which is like awesome. At the same time, you know, it can like burn you out. So like I said, I found like my community of people outside of CCS, but I do have friends within CCS. So I think just finding people who sort of have like-minded goals as you, I think is super important. They don't have to be the same exact goals, but if they're like, they have the same sort of, if they kind of like do school in a similar way and sort of have priorities that are similar to you, it definitely makes it a lot easier to sort of make work and life, you know, not so combined, but at the same time, not so like separate from each other. So it's like a nice in between. Yeah.
I can talk about this next. I'll start with the extracurriculars part. I think that's super cool. So I last year was the director of SB Hacks, which ran a 400-person hackathon on campus. Aaron was part of it at one point. And I think there's a lot of cool engineering organizations. I joined that organization after talking to some of my CCS computing seniors, and they basically brought me in. And every year I'll reach out to computing undergrads to see if they want to join. And those are really cool communities throughout engineering where you get to meet a lot of people. And I think work-life balance is kind of a mix of school, but I think the cool thing about college is school isn't the only thing. There's research, there's social life, and I think UCSB has a really great social life where you can do a variety of things. Like I like to watch movies, so I watch movies with my friends. And because of the different communities and groups that you have, I think work's honestly a little bit easier here because you can lean on people. Like I'll take classes with my friends in CCS and COE and stuff, and it makes those classes ever so slightly easier because you have those communities.
Oh, go ahead, Marianne, if you want to.
I don't have too much to say. I don't do too much outside of research in class, but I guess last year I was involved in Women Hacks, or when I was a first year. So I guess joining hackathons is definitely something fun to do. You can, I know some of my classmates were in SB Hacks last year, and they actually worked together with their CCS classmates. So I know that they enjoyed it a lot, and they ended up working more on their SB Hacks project after the hackathon was over. So, and it's also a good way to like make connections and things like that. But I do agree with Aaron that a lot of my friends tend to be like from engineering classes, the engineering classes that I've been taking, and yeah, I have been involved in SWE, Society of Women Engineers, where I met a lot of my engineering friends. So yeah.
I think there's lots of great ways, just like at UCSB, and some of it's academic, but it doesn't have to be, of just like making connections with people, because I think it's good to have a mental break. Just part of why CCSGEs are structured why they are, but that's for a different panel. But one of our questions is, I guess, also about those ways to sort of both take mental breaks, but connect it back to what you're doing, right? And that's part of the fun of being in CCS, is getting inspired by other things. And so one of our questions that we get asked is, we talk about CCS being an interdisciplinary place, a place where people connect and inspire each other with, things that they thought of as being unrelated before. But, we say that, and then it sounds really vague because we stop and people say, all right, well, how interdisciplinary is CCS really? Right? Did you just say that to convince me to come to UCSB? Or is that something that actually happens? And so Marianne is our obvious candidate, I think, to talk about this, because she started off describing herself from that perspective. So we'll start with you, Marianne. Like, how interdisciplinary is the experience both at UCSB and CCS?
Yeah, so for me personally, I've been wanting to become involved in computational biology since when I came here. But I know that there's plenty of other people in CCS computing specifically, where people have double majored in computer science and math. That's a popular one. Physics, that's Leah, who I was talking about earlier, actually was a double major in computer science and physics. Now she's very successful. And me and I think one other person is doing computing and bio. But even then, there's plenty of interdisciplinary classes that you can take. Like me personally, I've taken classes in the mechanical engineering department in synthetic biology. I'm taking a chemical engineering course right now. And to get into those classes, you have to talk to the professor and whatnot. But with CCS, getting your lower divs done quickly, it's easy to get into those more advanced classes and whatnot. And yeah, and I know Phil's actually teaching a music synthesis class with a music professor. So, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities for you to get involved in other areas of interest, not just in computer science. I definitely do believe that computing and just UCSB in general provides a lot of opportunity to get involved in interdisciplinary interests.
Yeah, so I think I also can have I have a little bit of input into the interdisciplinary aspect. This is really funny. I actually came into UCSB wanting to be a double major in film and media studies, which is like super random, like compared to biophysics, other STEM fields. I have very broad interests. I love human computer interaction. I love music. I love art. So I came into UCSB with sort of that goal. Obviously did not happen, because it is hard to double major in something that is not closely related to CS in some way. It's very difficult. It's possible. There are people who've done it, but it's very difficult. But for me, I still was able to find like opportunities. Like I took a lot of classes in media arts and technology. So I've taken like a data visualization class, and I'm currently taking like a computer music class. I think it's really similar to the one Phil's teaching, except this one's in the music department. And I found that having a background in computer science, especially in computer music, is like, it's like insane, like how much overlap there is and how much knowledge you can use when trying to work with others, or trying to work on specific projects, and like branching out and using that knowledge towards like creating something that's like, that other people who may not have the same skills as you, they might not be able to make that. So I love being able to take MAT classes. And also I spoke earlier about the haptics lab, but haptics, in case you didn't know, haptics is like a kind of like, it's a very interdisciplinary field involving psychology. It involves physics, electrical engineering, and computer science. So when I took the haptics class, and I worked in a haptics lab, and I found that it's really exciting being able to pull from all these different fields that you may have learned about in isolation, and being able to like build something out of that. But yeah, I love being able to, being a CCS student really helps you get those opportunities, because a lot of times, like I think Marian said she took like a mechie and like a chemical engineering class. And those are like pretty difficult to get into if you're not in CCS and you're not in those majors. So being a CCS student, a lot of professors will let you into those classes given that you're a CCS student, because they know you're passionate enough to put in the work, you know, the same amount of work as other students who are actually in that major. So I definitely think that's like a huge advantage that people should really, you know, take advantage of.
I'll finish off before handing it off to Phil to talk about his music synthesis class, but I'm not personally a super interdisciplinary person, but I am taking a poli-sci upper division class, and I don't think I would have gotten in if I didn't have like the backing and track record that CCS gives, right? Because usually they don't let you, like those kind of classes are closed off to majors because they fill up, but the professor was willing to take a chance on me because I provide interesting perspective. And so it's cool that you're just given opportunities to go try out things and with not very much risk, because I know that like it'll count towards a GE. And so it's still helping me with my degree, but I'm also getting to try out something cool and interesting.
Actually, to add on to that, I do think there are some classes where professors actually want students from different backgrounds. For instance, I'm in a biology grad class, which is modeling dynamical biological systems, where it's all biology grad students, but at the same time, you know, with modeling biological systems, you need to have a computer science component. And so he actually was inviting me into the class because I have a computer science background, and therefore I could provide insight into the projects that we were doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think actually I was tossing it off to me to talk about the music synthesis class, but I think rather than that, I'll wait and see if when we get to questions from the prospective students that are here, if anyone's interested in details on that. What I will mention is that if you're not if you don't have the chat window open, there's a lot of additional great comments in the chat. So like when people mention MAT and passing or COE, the chat has some definitions of those acronyms in case those are things that are not familiar to you. So let me pass it back to Savannah.
/ Megan. No, I got the next question. No,
Yes,
you're fine. You don't know our secret order. So next question is, go way back in your brain to when you were choosing a college. What was important to you when you were considering colleges? What factored into your decision choosing CCS over other programs?
I can start off with this one because I think originally when I was applying for colleges, UCSB was not my top choice. I actually envisioned a very different college experience, and this sort of extends beyond like just like computing majors. I think this is like something that I think a lot of prospective college students sort of have dealt with. But for me, I had this idea that because I wanted to work in a sort of very interdisciplinary, you know, type of like subset of CS, I remember I was like, oh, I want to go to the East Coast where there's like museums and like cool stuff out there, and like, oh, go to like New York or something. Like I had this idea in my head, and I feel like a lot of high schoolers have that too. And I wanted to go to like, I think I wanted to go to like a shoot, what are they called? Those like private schools with they have like, it's like humanities based private schools where they have a CS program. So that was like my kind of idea. I forgot what they're called. I'm like literally blanking out. Anyways, so that's kind of what I wanted, because I wanted not just CS, but I wanted like that sort of like that exposure to fields outside of CS. And I thought like a lot of these schools sort of have more of like a breadth in their curriculums. But I eventually, well, first of all, I found out how expensive it was, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So so like that kind of narrowed it down. And I think UCSB is just so unique in that it has CCS, like almost like no other school in the UC system has CCS, and it was still it still gave me the ability to like pursue those passions and like go down that route. And you're next to the beach, so I thought that was super cool. But yeah, definitely definitely it was like a multitude of like factors that helped me decide, but I'm really happy I came to UCSB, obviously. But yeah, if you're sort of having those like internal dilemmas, I think one thing that if you really want something to CCS sell, if you want something to sell you on this idea of CCS, it's the fact that because it's so small and because you're just kind of like they give you a lot of trust in like figuring out what you want to do. And if you know what you want to do and you feel very confident in that, like, you know exactly what you want to do with it, I think CCS is awesome because you can just like take that even further. But yeah, that's my little story. So
I guess to go off of that, something that at least I noticed that I was really grateful that I picked UCSB and CCS specifically was I was grateful because of the fact that at least at UCSB, you're not really in a competitive environment, which I know is present in some other schools, which I can't I can't really drive in situations like that. So yeah, I'm really grateful that the environment here in the community has been really supportive rather than harmful. So that's something I can add to that.
I kind of want to take this question in the opposite direction because I know that when I was looking at colleges, what I really cared about was like prestige and quality of program. But I don't think like looking back on it, those were the right things to really consider. Like those are important, but I think really when looking back, I think what's more important was happiness, which is like how happy are the students there? Are they just overwhelmed with work, or they just feel sad about their classes, or are they out doing fun things and making friends? I think that mattered a lot more in retrospect. And also opportunities, like how easy are opportunities to get? When going into college admissions, I was looking at what companies recruit at these universities, but that didn't end up mattering. I think what ended up mattering more was while you're at the university, what opportunities are provided to you? What do you have access to? And so at UCSB in particular, in CCS, you have opportunity to meet professors. I think we have a class where you get to hear about the research that all the professors across the department are doing, which is awesome. And you have really great access to faculty and opportunities. And I think people here in general are really happy. Like it's great weather, nice college town, people live close to each other, and you get to see your friends a lot. And you're kind of working collaboratively. There's no weeder classes or anything. It's all sort of everyone is working towards a common goal of helping each other. And so looking back on it, like those are what really shaped my college experience. And I think those are more important.
I think to add on to that, in terms of like the competitiveness that both Akshay and Marian talked about, like because not only is CCS really small, the computer science department in general, like Phil said, is only like 400 students. So even outside of CCS, your classes are super small and you basically know like everyone. Like I have met so many friends just from being in the same classes as them because you just see them over and over again. So you kind of know everyone at a certain point. And I think that really is what makes like an actual community within the CS department. And if you're looking at other schools, like I know like for Berkeley, for example, that is not the case. Like it's massive and the culture is just very different. The classes are pretty big. So I think in terms of just like studying computer science in general, this is like a very like atypical sort of environment for studying CS because at other schools it is definitely a competitive field to study. So I think that's one thing to definitely consider when you're picking between schools.
I have loved listening to all of your stories. And I mean, I could go off. But I want to say I really appreciate actually you bringing up that like you could feel that UCSB was like a place where you could be happy. And part of why Megan and I were just like nodding and emoji applauding as you were saying that is it's something that we hear as staff advisors from prospective students who in the past have been able to have campus visits, who've been able to like set foot on UCSB while other UCSB students are like walking around. And it's something that we worry about that for you as the class of 2025, that maybe you might be missing out on that vibe. And it matters, right? That vibe genuinely affects your life for the next 4 years. And so part of what we encourage you to think about is, you know, when I go to that campus eventually, is that a place where like people are smiling and like, are they offering each other like help? Or, you know, if you see a friend, do you say, hey, let's go get like, you know, Jamba Juice together or whatever? Like that just feeling will make such a difference for you. And you know, you're going to be a person for the next 4 years, just as much as you're going to be a student. And that really, really matters. And we want that to be part of what you're thinking about as you think about, you know, this very important decision. And so I really appreciate you, Akshay, for like bringing that up as a factor. That like prestige sounds really great, but you know, what are the other factors?
I think what you said were like, you have to be, you are a person, right? Like it's not like you're a robot just doing work all day, right? Like I think it's equally important to realize that you're doing work a part of your day, but you're doing a lot of other things, right? You're going out, you're going on walks, you're jogging, you're doing whatever, you're going to campus, and you have to spend a lot of your time there. And like that kind of atmosphere, like for me particularly, I don't ever study at the library because I don't like the library because it has a feeling of stress because people are there to study. But like I study in CCS because people there are really just studying because they're having fun, and or like the rest of campus just kind of has an atmosphere of people are having a good time. And so like I can't imagine what it would be like if the entire campus just had that like sense of dread and stress. Like I just wouldn't be able to deal with that. And I think that's really nice here where it's like it's a sunny day, people are out, they're out sunbathing, doing their homework on the lawn, right? There's people playing volleyball in the background right outside our dorms. Like I think there's that sense of calm and happiness which really motivates me.
I was typing it in the chat, but I'll just say it. I've made trips back to the student study room in CCS because I've heard like commotion and like loudness. And I'm like, what's going on back here? And everybody's like laughing over like an equation, like, huh,
That's
it
me.
worked. And I'm
Definitely
like,
been yelled at.
huh? Wait, you guys are like literally like boisterous, loud, having fun doing equations. And I'm like, all right, have fun. Bye. Back to the front office. So it is true. Okay, go ahead, Savannah.
It's all right. I mean, I was just going to add, like, there's even other like versions of like friendly CCS noise in the building. And some of it is just that, like, you know, we have pianos throughout the building. So like, it's not, you know, music students aren't the only people who can play the piano. And it's kind of fun to like meet students who are brushing off their piano skills for fun between classes and are like, you didn't know that about them, right? And so there's some of that sort of throughout the building. There's also just like, I'll walk by, you know, on my way to the restroom and like there's a mini chess tournament that's like busted out. So yeah, there's all kinds of just little bits of like fun throughout throughout the building, but also the campus, and the building is, I think, really special in that way, and that like that's very much a hive of CCS activity. And you know, not just first years, but you know, all CCS students have access to the building, and so it's a great way to connect, you know, up and down the sort of cycle of students. All right, so our last question is, you know, less about the past and more about the future, but I also want to keep an eye on time because I want to make sure that we have space for our prospective students to ask their questions. So what I might do is reserve that question just in case nobody has questions, but I find that unlikely. So we'll kind of put a pause on that and then see if the prospective students who are in the room have questions that they want to ask, whether it's your specific interest or it's just something that you feel like we haven't talked about, you want us to elaborate, you know, whatever. We are here to help answer your questions. I know this is being recorded, and so just keep in mind, you know, if this goes off the rails, we will cut the recording for YouTube, so like, don't worry about it. Feel free to take these last 10 minutes and really, you know, them in the chat, do your virtual hand, unmute yourself. This is a small space. It's not a webinar where we're locked behind a wall and you guys can't talk to each other. So that's, I think, part of the flavor of CCS anyway. So this is the part where I'm like prone to rambling because there's awkward silence. So if you don't want to listen to me do that, there you go. Yay!
Hello. Hey, so one of the things I was wondering, so it was mentioned that in the non-CCS classes, you'd have like your little CCS group that, taking the classes together. So is it like really common that, you'll have like your CCS group taking non-CCS classes together? Is that, do they usually shoot to take the same classes and group together, or is it kind of just, oh, look, we ended up in the same class, and then is it from that?
A bit of both, honestly. I think like Erin will say for her CCS cohort, like they'll take classes together somewhat purposefully. I will too. Like if there's a hard class and I know it's going to be a rough time, I will make sure to take it with my CCS cohort because I know they're going to excel and we will work through it together. I think there's been classes where like I more so do it with my friends group, which are COE CS majors, and we will purposefully take classes together. But there are just like a ton of tiny communities within CCS. And I think because it's such a small department, I've never been in a class where I don't know like a quarter of the class, honestly. Like you just kind of get to know a lot of people in your classes, and it's pretty easy to just text someone about what's going on.
Yeah, I think last quarter, Akshay and I were taking this like grad class, and then I didn't realize, I just kind of like took it, and then I actually realized there's like a ton of people I knew taking it. And so it was kind of cool. And then Akshay's like, oh, do you want to be partners? And I'm like, yeah. So it's kind of like, it's kind of nice. You just like see that there's like people, taking the same classes as you. And it's like, it's cool. It just happens, So like, it's never something you have to worry about really.
Plus, you always know that your CCS friends will carry you through the group project every time. That's why, if there's a CCS person in that class, I will literally reach out. I was like, do you want to be partners? Because they'll carry you.
Are the CCS students like usually like more, advanced than the normal like COE students? Like is there like a significant gap there? Because like you said, they carry you. Is it just because like they work harder, or is it because they're just like
not at all
advanced?
Honestly, I think the smartest person I know is a COE CS major, like one of my housemates. But I think it's just you have that tightness. It's like because in a group project you could get thrown with random people, and that kind of sucks sometimes because you don't really have that closeness and you don't have that like loyalty to each other. I think with CCS, because you're in such a smaller subsection, you have that loyalty. But I don't think there's any real gap between CS and CCS computing and COE. I think both groups have amazing, excellent people.
And I'll say that they're, I think if you had asked that question 12 years ago, there would have been a different answer. I think there was more of a gap between CCS students and kind of the general College of Engineering population 12 years ago. But computer science as a field has become so crazy competitive. And I think also the profile of UC Santa Barbara, both as a campus in general, as well as particularly in computer science, has really risen over the last 10 years to where all of the students who get admitted to computer science, whether through COE or through CCS, are all excellent students. I do think, though, that one of the things that is a bit of a difference is that I think you will find within CCS that there is this passion for the discipline. In COE, there are some students who have that same passion for the discipline, and there are other people who are just like, yeah, computer science, it's a way to get a good paycheck. I don't love it, but I do it. I think what really distinguishes CCS is really that passion for the discipline.
I might even just kind of spin off in an opposite direction, and I hope I'm not cutting off anyone's questions, but I know that our panelists one of the things you guys had talked about potentially discussing before the panel was sort of imposter syndrome. And just taking a minute to sort of acknowledge that, because I think this is related to this conversation, right? This question of prestige and excellence, but both are related. So I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to talk about that for a minute if you wanted to.
Yeah, so I think I kind of mentioned this earlier, but you'll notice in your cohort, at least, there'll be plenty of people who have different interests. And because of that, they have different like specializations. So for me, there have been a lot of times where I don't really understand what my classmates are saying just because I'm not, specializing in their area of interest, or I come from a different background. But you'll find that during your time in CCS, you'll be able to just focus on what you're doing, and you'll be able to learn more about what other people are doing. So it's very easy to feel like you're left out or you're out of the loop because everyone's doing different things. But I think you come to appreciate your uniqueness. At least I have during my time in CCS. So.
I think something that was said to me by the faculty and by like staff on one of my first days is the fact that you were admitted means that you're meant to be there, right? Like I think it's easy to fall into the trap of saying like, I'm not good enough, like this is an elite school or something, but there's not really like a sense of elitism in CCS. Like I think we have a lot of respect for each other and everyone has their own like path. And I think just being admitted is like a stamp of approval that like you can do it. Like you're definitely capable enough.
Our past dean, Bruce Tiffany, used to always say, you were admitted because you are smarter than us faculty. Like you don't have as much knowledge as the faculty have yet, but you will surpass them. And it is the faculty's goal that you will surpass them in knowledge eventually. So yeah, you're definitely admitted for many reasons.
I guess I can also answer this imposter syndrome question because I 100% feel imposter syndrome every single day. But I think it also is like what Marian said, like everyone has very different interests, and just because you don't understand what like other people are talking about does not make you less worthy. It just means you have different interests from them, and that's like totally okay. But I found that like finding communities, like even outside of CCS, you can find more people who have similar career or like future goals as you. And that definitely helps with the imposter syndrome, knowing that other people are feeling, who have the same goals as you, are feeling the exact same way. And you're all sort of like going through this journey together. So yeah, I found that just finding a group of people who are on the same journey as you really kind of makes it like validates your emotions a little more, because you realize that it's pretty normal to feel that way.
I know we've got like technically 3 minutes left, but I will acknowledge that there was a kind of a question about like what kind of jobs do most CCS computing graduates go into, and there's really good answers in the chat. And I'll just kind of summarize, but then we can spin off, I think, for a few minutes. But basically, some students go into jobs in the usual big companies. So, Facebook, Apple, Google, or even smaller startups. And then some go on to graduate school, right? Some become founders of their own businesses. So there's lots of options, but I kind of wanted to relay that information, but also if we want to just kind of briefly talk about that in our last couple of minutes, I think we could make some time for that.
I think, yeah, I mean, we have our alumni go to very different things. I think there's a couple major ones, right? There's people going to grad school. A lot of people go directly to PhDs, which to me is kind of wild, but it's a thing you can do if you're in CCS. Aaron and I are going into industry and big tech. I think some people really want to work on interesting problems, so they go to smaller companies where they're really working on like super niche, cool problems. But I think generally, like, there's a lot of access to whatever you want to do. Like, I think everyone picks their path rather than being like sort of shoehorned.
Yeah, I think that's the main difference between like COE and CCS. And COE, I think there's a general idea that most people are going to become software engineers after they graduate, like funnel straight into that. I think a smaller percentage of people in COE go to grad school compared to CCS. I think it's like a pretty, it's a much more significant number. And that's mostly because, as was previously stated, people have very specific interests and they sort of make that, they like make those opportunities for themselves by going to grad school. But yeah, like Akshay said, like we're both going into software engineering, and that's a very common field to go into, but also it's like very broad too. Like in the chat, I said data science, but that's like extremely broad. Like that can go into like data engineering or like machine learning, and it's just like it's super broad. So yeah, you can literally do so many things with it. But those are just some of the most common things.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have too much to add on that. I'm personally thinking about grad school, just because I think that's the best way I can pursue more computational biology research. So I think research industry afterwards. I'm not too sure about academia, but I mean, you know, you don't really have you can do pretty much whatever you want with what CCS offers you. So yeah.
All right. So we've had our hour exactly, really, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've helped answer most of your burning questions, but I just want to let you know, there's lots of ways to get in touch with us if you have any more questions. If you're thinking about that SIR deadline in a week and a half, right? What do you need to know? And you can certainly get in touch with Megan or me directly. You can email us, or you can email our student assistants at info@ccs.ucsb.edu. They're happy to answer a lot of questions or redirect, but I also know that you can get in touch with computing students directly. So Akshay and Marianne have, volunteered their time and accessibility, and I believe they reached out to you in various ways and offered to pair you up with a current computing student to help answer your questions. There's Discord. There's a Discord for prospective students. There's a Discord for current students. I think it's really surprising to people how happy CCS students are to talk about CCS with students who aren't CCS students yet. And so I really want to encourage you that if you have questions, please, don't keep them to yourself, ask them. We are very, very happy to get answers for you. And I think that kind of wraps it up for now. I'm going to go ahead and stop my recording, I think.